I'm not sure if y'all have heard, but 5G has been referred to as the innovation platform and is also expected to be the greatest technology introduction since the internet. So what does that really mean for all of us in this room? What does it mean for the clients that we are servicing? There's certainly a lot of new applications, new verticals, and new revenue streams coming with 5G. As we've seen over the past 4 decades with mobile generations, it has ultimately impacted lives and businesses in ways we didn't anticipate. Certainly with 5G, there will be new things coming we can't imagine today, but there are certainly thoughts and ideas of how 5G will get started.
So let me just get started by saying that 5G is both a collection of technologies as well as a new set of standards that sets very ambitious goals. In terms of the way that 5G technology will be deployed, in the ways in which new devices will start being used for new types of applications that will improve the user experience in ways that we are sort of having an idea about, but will be eventually proven in the market. When you look at the key ingredients of 5G, if I were to split this into 2 categories, standardization and second, technologies, I'll start with standardization and simply point out the fact that besides providing a deadline and the impetus to reach agreement and develop products, services to a particular timeline, standards also have acted, and the experience with deploying 4G has demonstrated that, have acted as a major force in creating new markets, in producing value from services that up until that point were not immediately apparent. That's, for example, how service providers compete, how mobile network operators in the US have been creating a lot of value for an industry that reaches further than just the equipment, the technology. If you're looking at the second component for 5G, you can talk about metaphorically a basket of components. One analogy that I've used before is that you can think of it as building blocks in a super Lego set. We all had Lego sets. Well, maybe not all of us, but some of us had Lego sets. And I know I always wanted to have an infinite supply of building blocks that will give you a chance to build whatever you want. And I'm only slightly exaggerating here, but 5G provides building blocks in terms of technologies that will help data communication be more effective, higher bandwidth, higher throughput, lower latency. Those are the key technological advances that 5G brings to the table in an environment that is already in place for taking advantage of this type of communication. Just want to point out very quickly that a lot of what we're doing today, from daily aspects of our life to the way business processes run, manufacturing, healthcare, all that is permeated by the emergence of digital software-based systems that leverage things like Moore's Law, the ability to gradually increase the storage, the capacity, the processing power that devices offer in order to run that software. 5G is the key missing ingredient in making that truly pervasive. So I know that you've probably heard, read, or listened to many very misty-eyed descriptions of the benefits of 5G. So before we get into all the imagined use cases, it may be worth talking a bit about a few more specifics. So Lori, I know you had another question here.
Yes, so for the folks in the room, I think it's very interesting to hear more about what will be some of the new verticals that as an ecosystem we can address and allow us an opportunity to generate more revenue. From the research I've done, manufacturing is one of the largest verticals expected to benefit from 5G. And I think coming from the in-building world, it's not necessarily been at the top of the list of verticals, pursued by the in-building community. And I think we're going to see with 5G a lot of new opportunities and use cases around manufacturing facilities, which, guess what, are indoors.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I was looking up recently statistics that show that when you look at industrial manufacturing as a sector, globally, we expect a tripling of the investment in automation and robotics over the next 5 years. So it's going to go from around $150 billion to about $480 billion within the next 5 years. What does that point to is the fact that as an economy sector, industrial manufacturing is on the cusp of a transition that's going to be a inflection point in terms of the ability to improve productivity, increase flexibility by leveraging technology. So where does 5G play into that? Well, it's centered around low latency that can help industrial processes close the control loop. It's centered around security. It's centered around the promise for leveraging 5G standard capabilities that support deployment of IoT devices that will help factory floor processes monitor and manage ongoing processes more easily and more cost effectively. But most importantly, I think it holds the promise that industrial robots can cooperate more easily with each other. And if I were to use an analogy, I'll direct you to the ant colony analogy. If you look at an ant, it's pretty simplistic in terms of its capabilities. Look at the sophistication that an ant colony can create by simply coordinating action against many different individuals. So with that analogy, 5G in an industrial manufacturing environment will enable the simplification of automated processes involving robots. That will make the robots smaller, faster, cheaper. They'll consume less energy and provide the businesses more benefits in terms of improving their profitability, reducing their costs, and being more flexible to accommodate changes in their business.
So the robots will be operating more in a coordinated fashion as opposed to being individually wired.
Yes, but it's not going to be Skynet. Just want to be clear. We're not getting to Skynet yet.
And so, Gheorge, one of the other large verticals anticipated to really benefit from 5G is around healthcare. And of course, hospitals have traditionally really embraced in building cellular solutions, and but 5G may increase that even more so.
Absolutely. And this is not a new trend. If you look at the telemedicine as an emerging new technology in healthcare, statistics show that up to 80% of emergency room operations already use some form of telemedicine. It's primarily centered around being able to schedule specialist consultations for neurological or stroke victims, where time is really of the essence, and the next specialist may be few towns over. Remote monitoring, where hospitals and healthcare facilities can save costs by relying on sensors that are communicating with each other. Those use cases are in place. So demand is there, demand is understood. What 5G brings as a new ingredient is the ability to leverage the lower latency, the security, the ability to sustain higher data volumes in a cost-effective manner that will take this to the next level. There's two aspects that get discussed in healthcare and 5G discussions. One of which has to do with providing remote healthcare to elderly patients in their homes. We live longer, and we require more care, and we have got to find solutions to keep healthcare costs under control. So having access to specialists without seeking them out in person, perhaps the patients aren't mobile, but they can communicate remotely via the facilities afforded by a 5G network, is going to be one area where 5G will benefit. Another growing opportunity is remote robotic surgery, in which you have a top-rated surgeon. It could be someone at Mount Sinai uptown is going to be able to remotely perform surgery on an emergency case that's located further away. Key ingredients for that to happen are going to go around the ability to leverage an infrastructure that doesn't require an upfront infrastructure spend for that facility. They don't have to trench fiber to build out, high-speed, low-latency ATM network. They can leverage instead a wireless communication network that provides much lower latency. That will be the 5G network. Provides the security that maintains confidentiality of patient data, and most importantly, leverages a reliable communication path. You don't want a remote robotic surgery to kind of stop in the middle. the surgeon kind of, keep pulling or pushing on something while the robot is buffering.
Yes, I mean, I don't know about you all, but the idea of remote surgery seems still kind of futuristic to me, but certainly if you're in a remote location and it's a life or death situation, I would probably go for it, given with lack of alternatives. So one of the other key vertical growth areas is around media and entertainment. And of course, stadium venues have certainly been a prime vertical for in-building solutions, but I think with 5G, we'll really see a shift in how those are utilized. And Gheorge, I know that stadium venues is very near and dear to your heart, and you are paving a path at Ericsson for stadium-centric solutions.
Yeah, and when you and I used to go to a baseball game, we'll probably just sit back and watch the game and enjoy that. But I think most people attending a baseball game today are going to stream their experience to their friends, to other participants, spectators in the field. So the user experience is shifting to a completely different way to interact and consume that sports event, concert, or whatever type of engagement may be. So what we see there is predominantly a large increase in the amount of time that subscribers spend streaming. 5G can help by virtue of leveraging higher throughput because of the wider bandwidth channels that are available in terms of pushing more bits and bytes down to subscribers, and also help subscribers push bits and bytes up through the network so that they can be streamed to their friends online, live streamed, etc. So what does this mean in practical terms from a technological standpoint? When you look at one of the key ingredients of 5G, specifically the availability of higher frequency bands in the millimeter wave range, we see the emergence of what is called extreme broadband. We're going to look at throughput speeds in the range of up to 20 gigabit per second that make use of line-of-sight communication in a sports arena, stadium, or concert hall. And the ability to combine broader bandwidth channels with technologies that 5G is building on top of, like beamforming, are going to significantly improve the user experience. What it means for a venue owner is an opportunity to monetize their events beyond just the attendance, the people that are physically there. There are opportunities to build on services like augmented reality and virtual reality that can offer a player's eye view to participants, whether they're located there or remotely. So it's going to be, in a way, you can think of it as Ready Player One. You're donning your goggles and you're going to experience the view from, let's say, LeBron James's standpoint on the field when he gets fouled. And whether you see an elbow or a shoulder or a beautiful shot that makes it into the basket, it's an additional level of experience that is facilitated by the collection of technologies that we were talking about. And that's what we value. We live, as individual consumers, we live in an environment where the most valuable commodity is our attention. Being able to solicit that with an experience that goes above and beyond the average is going to be a very valuable characteristic that sports venue owners, operators, and other entities will leverage.
Yes, I agree, and I think that the venues are really looking for ways to draw people, back into the venues. I know I've talked to friends who say, well, I'd rather watch the game from the comfort of my recliner and not pay $10 for a beer and deal with the traffic and the parking. But to be able to go and have this really cool, immersive fan experience is likely to get people out of their recliner and back to the venues to enjoy that.
Absolutely, and you bring up a good point, which is that we already see that venue owners are aware that the fan experience begins on the way to the venue. It's not just when you sit down and you're reclining, you're calming down and you're ready for the game to start or the concert to begin. It's the hassle and the stress associated with finding a parking spot and navigating your way to your seat and so on and so forth. And that's another area where technology like 5G holds the ability to streamline and improve the user experience. Transportation and autonomous vehicles in particular hold the promise to not just realize additional revenue sources, but also improve safety. One statistics that I recently came across was showing that when you look at the number of traffic car crashes in the US, it's a very interesting curve, because starting around 1995, the number of annual car crashes is on a constant decline until around 2005, when it plateaus, and then around 2015 or so, it starts raising up again. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of that has to do with lack of attention while driving. I know it happens to me every day almost, driving to work. I noticed that there seems to be an average fewer cars that cross an intersection through a green light. And the reason is very simple. You know, the stoplight switches to green, but there's always going to be somebody in the line ahead of you who's going to be texting on their phone. You're honking, they finally take off, but instead of having 5 cars go through, you only had 3. So what does that mean in practice from a 5G standpoint is that being able to rely on low latency, high throughput communication mechanisms will allow your car to communicate with cars around you and with the network along with the infrastructure on the roadway. So in practical terms, for the fan who's driving his family or his friends to the stadium or the arena for an event or a concert, they'll be able to navigate more smoothly. They're going to be less stressed and the experience will be better. On the highway, on my commute to work, the technology will bring improvements in allowing for the car to take over. The driver will no longer have to directly control it, and that frees up time for, obviously, we're going to stream some more stuff, so there's going to be a lot of media and entertainment consumption increase, but it's very likely that a lot of that time is going to end up being dedicated to, let's call it professional services. You'll end up working on your way to work more than you do now.
George, let me speak for the ladies in the room. That'll be the time when we do our makeup. Right. Possibly.
Yeah, it's really going to shift the way in which we approach congestion. It's going to shift the way in which businesses view commute time, and it's going to essentially create a net positive economic growth by even the virtue of hopefully reducing some of the car crash fatalities that seem to be on the rise.
So George, last year at Ericsson, we had a slogan, 5G is coming, ready or not, choose ready. And this year we're saying, be 5G. 5G is here. It's no longer a matter of being ready. I mean, it's here, it's happening. Still, that being said, are there recommendations for everyone, as you're deploying systems, deploying networks, to think about, how will this upgrade, how will this future-proof for 5G in the very near future?
Absolutely. And as you look at the US market, you see that most major network operators have made very clear announcements about their plans to deploy commercial 5G networks before the end of 2018. There are lists of cities, there are specific frequency bands that are targeted, going from 600 through mid-band and millimeter wave as well. And most importantly, we're moving from the early technology trials to commercial deployments that are going to validate many of the assumptions that we discussed before. As it stands, I think the best way to prepare now for the coming wave of 5G deployment is going to be to consider, for example, attending industry events. There's one coming up next week in LA, and getting involved and informed in ongoing technology demonstrations, details around the work that is being done in this area by operators, infrastructure vendors, and other companies. But specifically, I will say, and this is a topic that I heard on the previous panel, there was a discussion that to me was extremely interesting, because the topic of the previous panel, which was very good by the way, was not whether enterprises should consider mobile broadband connectivity, but how will they go about making that happen? So from a conceptual standpoint, we've already made a mental transition to it's a given. This echoes, the fact that's been reported in the media. The United Nations Development Program is actually ranked broadband access as a basic human right. It sounds like it's at the base of the Maslow hierarchy of needs now, and that's only partially meant in jest. It's the reality that this is a social lubricant, an economic lubricant that's really helpful for the experience that we're enjoying. So in practical terms, it's very obvious that we want to look at in-building solution selection as a key portion of being able to minimize the disruption that building owners, enterprises, landlords experience as part of deploying technology that will facilitate access to 5G and applications and services built on top of that. So solutions that can minimize that disruption by being 5G ready, whether it's a software upgrade or it's going to be the ability to incorporate the technology when it becomes available, will be the first thing to look at. And second, start to understand some of the basic physics around what does propagation in the higher frequency bands mean in terms of being able to rely on outdoor-in coverage. It's probably not going to be as effective. The higher the frequency band, the lower that the signal strength inside the building will be. And if you look at millimeter wave, anything that's got to cross through a building barrier of any sort is just not going to work. So it's going to be a shift that, in order to manage and maintain the user experiences that will be available outdoor, building owners and landlords and enterprises are going to want to consolidate or consider the ability to smoothly transition to 5G capable solutions.
Yes, I think you mentioned millimeter wave, and so for indoor spaces as well, we're probably talking about large open venues like manufacturing facilities or stadiums or airports when it comes to millimeter wave with 5G.
Absolutely, yeah. So with 5G, the new frequency band that opens up above 20 gigahertz holds the promise of channel bandwidth that goes to 800 megahertz or possibly more. Implementing advanced signal processing technologies will bring throughput speeds in the range of up to 20 gigabits per second. So it's going to be an extreme broadband experience. And that the key ingredient for that to work will be line of sight between the radios and the users of that network. So it means in practice, indoor hotspots, outdoor hotspots, large open spaces like arenas, malls, airports, those will be the first venues to deploy this kind of technology.
Excellent. Well, I know we are coming close on time, and it's been kind of a long morning, and people probably need caffeine. So we have a couple of minutes. I do want to give an opportunity for any questions. If anyone has questions or comments around the 5G topics and how it relates to indoor use cases and new technology uses.
Hi, thank you. Quite a few of the 5G radios that we're working with, including Ericsson's, are still quite large, with the antenna and the radio combined. Do you see that being reduced in the near future?
We do, and actually it's an interesting topic. The physics of it make the size of the antenna quite a bit smaller at high frequencies. The ability to leverage massive MIMO, where you have many more transmitters than the number of streams, also requires that the antenna and the radio are combined together. So because of the ability to leverage technology like beamforming, we see a reduction in power consumption for the device. So if you look at just to share with you the Ericsson product roadmap, you see a trend towards decreasing size, weight, and dimensions for the new 5G radios. So they're going to get smaller.
Sorry, could you repeat his question?
Yes, sorry. The question was, when you look at the 5G radio portfolios available today, a lot of them seem to be bulky, and they're also combining an antenna. Are there any plans to reduce the size? No worries.
Do you see CBRS as one of the frequencies that 5G is going to be able to be used for?
Absolutely. So if you look at the 3GPP specification, the mid-band is defined to start at 3.5, 4.2, and 4.9 up to 6 gigahertz. CBRS is a truly innovative platform in the United States because it brings the possibility for shared spectrum access that will really truly widen the range of entities that can build networks, operate them, and create services. So it's clearly going to be an important part of the transition to 5G.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I will conclude. I know we had kind of a short time today, and 5G is a very extensive topic. If any of you are in Los Angeles next week, please stop by the Ericsson booth. We will have a number of hands-on live 5G demos we would love to share with you. And feel free to talk with myself or Gheorge throughout the day here. So thank you for your time and interest.
Great, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Lori and Gheorge. You know, we're going to